Picture this. It's 2025. Elon Musk has rockets landing themselves like something out of a sci-fi movie. We have phones more powerful than the computers that sent Apollo to the moon. AI can write essays, create art, drive cars, and yet we can't do something we accomplished over 50 years ago with slide rules and primitive computers. We can't send humans back to the moon. But here's the truly disturbing part. What if I told you that the reason we're stuck has nothing to do with technology? That the real obstacle is something far more unexpected, something that would have been unthinkable to the Apollo astronauts. Stay until the end, because the truth is going to shock you. By the way, quick question. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how far this reaches. Now, let me take you back to where this story really begins. July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong is about to take humanity's first steps on another world. The Saturn V rocket, the most powerful machine ever built, just delivered 3 men to lunar orbit after a journey of 250,000 miles. Think about that for a second. 250,000 miles with 1960s technology. But here's what most people don't realize about Apollo. It wasn't just ambitious, it was insane, borderline reckless by today's standards. The entire mission was basically one giant rocket, one spacecraft, one shot. You launch, you go, you land, you come back. Simple, elegant, terrifyingly risky. The lunar module, the thing that actually landed on the moon, had walls so thin you could punch through them. I'm not exaggerating. Aluminum foil is thicker. The computer had less processing power than a modern calculator, and the whole operation from launch to splashdown took just 8 days. 8 days to reach the moon, land, explore, and return home. But most importantly, there was something else driving Apollo, something we've completely lost today: fear. The Cold War was at its peak. The Soviet Union had already put the first satellite in space, the first man in space, the first walk in space. America was losing, and in the minds of politicians and military leaders, losing the space race meant losing the ideological battle for the future of humanity, communism versus democracy, and the whole world was watching. So money poured in like water. At its peak, NASA received nearly 5% of the entire federal budget. 5%. Today, they get barely 1%. The Apollo program cost the equivalent of $290 billion in today's money, and nobody blinked, because the stakes felt existential. 3 astronauts died in a fire during a ground test in 1967, Apollo 1. It was a tragedy, but you know what happened next? They kept going. They fixed the problems and launched again 2 years later. Can you imagine that happening today? We'll get to that. By 1972, Apollo 17 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. 12 men had walked on the moon. America had won. The space race was over. And then, something strange happened. We just stopped. Fast forward to today. We're planning to return to the moon with the Artemis program. Artemis 3 is the mission that'll finally put boots back on the lunar surface. And on paper, it sounds straightforward. We've done it before, right? Wrong. Because when you look at the mission plan, your jaw drops. Here's what has to happen. First, SpaceX launches a fuel depot into Earth orbit. Then they send multiple tanker rockets up, one after another, to fill that depot with propellant. Then they launch the Starship lunar lander, also uncrewed, which docks with the depot, refuels, and flies itself to lunar orbit, where it just waits. Meanwhile, NASA launches 4 astronauts in the Orion spacecraft on top of the Space Launch System, the SLS. Orion travels to the moon, enters this special orbit called a near-rectilinear halo orbit, try saying that 5 times fast, and docks with Starship. 2 astronauts transfer over to Starship, descend to the surface, do their moonwalk, then fly back up to dock with Orion again. Finally, all 4 astronauts pile back into Orion and return to Earth. If you're thinking that sounds ridiculously complicated compared to Apollo, you're absolutely right. With Apollo 11, it was 1 rocket, 1 journey, 1 vehicle. With Artemis 3, we're coordinating multiple launches orbital refueling, 2 different spacecraft, multiple docking maneuvers, and about a dozen critical steps where any single failure could doom the entire mission. NASA themselves admit this will be one of the most complex engineering feats in the history of deep space exploration. So the obvious question is, why? Why are we making this so impossibly hard? Why can't we just rebuild the Saturn V, slap some modern computers in it, and go? And this is where things get interesting, because there are actually several answers, and none of them are what you'd expect. First, the mission itself is different. Apollo was a sprint. Get there, plant the flag, grab some rocks, get out. Artemis is a marathon. We're planning to establish a permanent presence on the moon. That means longer stays, more equipment, more experiments, more everything. A single rocket can't carry all that mass with current propulsion technology, hence the complexity. Second, we don't actually have the Saturn V anymore. And no, we can't just rebuild it. Yes, the blueprints still exist, buried in archives, but the engineers who designed it, most of them are retired or dead. The factories that built the parts, long gone. The supply chains, ancient history. The technology inside, hopelessly outdated. Imagine trying to manufacture a 1960s IBM mainframe from scratch today, but you have to make it interface with modern systems. It would be easier and cheaper to just build a new computer. Same logic applies here. The SLS, for all its flaws and delays, is actually more cost-effective than resurrecting a 60-year-old rocket. But here's the third reason, and this one is the real answer, the one nobody wants to talk about. The reason we can't go back to the moon like we used to isn't about money. It's not about technology. It's not about complexity. It's about fear. Not the fear that motivated Apollo, the opposite kind. The fear of failure, the fear of death, the fear of public backlash. In 1969, we were willing to accept risk. Society's relationship with danger was fundamentally different. People smoked on airplanes. Kids didn't wear seatbelts. 3 astronauts dying in a fire was treated as a tragic setback, not a reason to cancel the entire program. Today, 1 failure, 1 death, and NASA would face congressional investigations, budget cuts, and possibly the end of human spaceflight altogether. They're holding on to their reputation by a thread after the Challenger and Columbia disasters. That's why Artemis has been delayed over and over. That's why they've spent 2 years investigating cracks in the Orion heat shield, a problem Apollo never worried about. That's why they need thousands of ground tests, multiple uncrewed missions, redundant safety systems, backup plans for backup plans. We've become so risk-averse that we've made the moon nearly unreachable. And it's not just space. This same pattern is everywhere. The New York City subway built 28 stops in 4 years back in the early 1900s. A recent subway line with just 3 stops took 17 years. During World War II, we built an aircraft carrier every single month. The most recent one took over a decade. The Manhattan Project developed nuclear weapons from scratch in 3 years. Today's nuclear modernization program will take 30 years and cost 40 times more. We've traded speed and boldness for caution and bureaucracy. And maybe that's good. Maybe fewer people die. Maybe we avoid catastrophic mistakes. But the cost is that we've lost something Apollo had in abundance, the audacity to take big risks for big rewards. So that's the real answer. We can't go back to the moon the way we used to because we're not the same people anymore. We're safer, more careful, more responsible, but we're also slower, more expensive, more paralyzed by the fear of what might go wrong. The Apollo astronauts flew in spacecraft with walls thinner than aluminum foil because someone decided the risk was worth it. Today, we wouldn't even let them pass the first safety review. And maybe that's okay. Maybe this time, when we return to the moon, we'll do it right. Slower, yes. Safer, yes. More expensive, absolutely. But sustainable, permanent, built to last. Or maybe, just maybe, we've forgotten how to dream big. President Kennedy once said, "We choose to go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard." Maybe the hardest part isn't the engineering anymore. Maybe it's remembering how to be bold again. So, what do you think? Are we being too cautious, or is this the smart way to explore space? Drop your thoughts below. And if this video made you think differently about space exploration, hit that like button and subscribe because we've got so much more to uncover. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.